Is this thing on? Welcome back to Big Mouth, and fancy seeing you here in June. I'm very welcome, my friends, and especially my enemies. Come in, sit down, no touching. I don't do the touching. Welcome back to Big Mouth, and you can keep this conversation and any other conversation I ignite going with me, should I say, over on my Twitter at Movies TV Mad, on my Vero at BigMouth1, and the extension to this channel is my Instagram, Big Mouth. Welcome to this week's, did we have one last week? I don't think so. Welcome to this week's edition of the Star Wars show. And Kathleen Kennedy is speaking publicly for the very first time in a long time. And I think this is where we want to begin this week's Star Wars show. And this is Rolling Stone. We want to read this article, and I will give you my thoughts on it. Haven't read it yet, just saw the header that Kathleen Kennedy has said is going to be more challenging post Skywalker saga because there's no novelizations, there's no comic books to refer to. Now, just looking at that, it seems a bit of a silly thing to say. So I want to read this article and see what she has to say. So should we go? I think so. That's what you're here for, right? Lucasfilm Kathleen Kennedy on Rise of Skywalker and the future of Star Wars. In a digital exclusive from our upcoming Star Wars cover package, Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy discusses the challenges of moving the franchise forward, George Lucas, criticism, and much more. So this should be interesting. Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy may well be the most powerful woman in Hollywood, but let's not go that far. And she's hardly a newcomer to the world of blockbusters, serving as Steven Spielberg's producer since '82's E.T. That partnership extended to Spielberg's collaborations on the Indiana Jones movies with George Lucas, who anointed Kennedy as his successor in 2012, as he negotiated a sale to Disney. As the guardian of the Star Wars universe, Kennedy has needed every ounce of her experience, never hesitating to swap out creative teams, even mid-movie. Oh my God, they're trying to plug that as a plus, are they? When necessarily, as on 2018's commercial disappointment Solo. In October, 2 weeks before Game of Thrones, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss pulled out of a year-old deal to develop a new Star Wars trilogy. Kennedy called Rolling Stone to discuss December 20th's Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. It looks like she definitely wanted to talk publicly and try and put a few things to bed and maybe put to bed the negative ninnies. I don't know if she's done that because I haven't read it yet, so let me read it. And the post-Skywalker saga cinematic future for the franchise that remains wide open, even as Last Jedi director Rian Johnson and Marvel's Kevin Feige develop potential films. Now, let's see if she mentions Rian Johnson. That also will be interesting. Jurassic World director Colin Trevorrow was slated to write and direct Episode 9 before you brought J.J. Abrams back in this final entry in the trilogy. A particular hard nut to crack. Every one of these movies is particularly a hard nut to crack. There's no source material. We don't have comic books. We don't have 800-page novels. We don't have any other than passionate storytellers who get together and talk about what the next iteration might be. So you see, this headline was taken out of context. She's right. You know, this isn't adapted from comic books, but they do have the original trilogy and the prequels to look back on. So there is an element of media there. So that kind of shoots down what she's saying. But I suppose there isn't all that. I mean, there's history there, isn't there? There's history to refer to. So but if you've got an imagination, and as she says, passion, the challenge shouldn't be as hard, should it? This is Star Wars. We go through a really normal development process that everybody else does. You start by talking to filmmakers who you think exhibit the sensibilities that you're looking for, and I would argue that the list is very small. People who really do have the sensibilities about these kind of movies, and then the experience and the ability to handle how enormous a job these movies are. So we try to be as thoughtful as we possibly can about making these choices. I would also argue that sometimes people get involved in the normal development process, and then they realise, oh my God, this is so much more than I ever imagined. So it's pretty common that when you're working on movies, you're not making choices and decisions that necessarily work out. So she really is saying, basically, yeah, I brought these people in, And unfortunately, our visions for this didn't work out, and it got a bit too much for them. Very, very interesting there. And in a way, I can understand what she's saying. Exactly the way you want from the get-go. It's been an evolving process with lots of people and lots of opinions. And then you try to shape something into what it eventually becomes. So I feel really fortunate that I've worked with so many great people that have been absolutely committed. JJ being one of them. He's a huge fan, incredibly passionate about Star Wars, and has been from the moment he and I sat down and started talking about this. And the more he got involved, the more excited he became. So I think if you asked him today, he'd probably wish he'd been in a situation where he could have done all three. Now, this is a very interesting point that I've actually talked about on this channel before. He should have done. Now, obviously, it sounds like, and she's raising this situation, it sounds like from this that she agrees with me, that she knows that JJ should have done the whole trilogy, and that's where the mistake was. But as I said, these are huge projects, so it's very difficult unless there's 3 or 4 years in between. It's not really physically possible. Yes, it was. I suppose, no, I was going to say it was possible for George, but George did have 3 or 4 years gaps as well. So I kind of see what she's saying. Again, I've got to say how I see it. And I see right now she hasn't said anything that I don't agree with. All got to know, and again, it went through much of what we often go through, which is endless discussion, lots of artwork. Luckily, JJ had already been into a pretty deep dive before he was doing Force Awakens, and during the process of that movie, it's almost like an education of getting acquainted with all aspects of Star Wars. Not only just looking at the movies, but talking to the number of people that are still around that worked with George for years, understanding the mythology that he created. One of the things we talk about all the time is the fact that it was very important to George that these stories really meant something, that they have something to say, that they have a real emotional core. So we spent a lot of time talking about that and trying to find the spine of a story that feels satisfying. When you're dealing, as I said, with something where you don't necessarily have any source material, but you do, Kathleen. This is the only thing I don't agree with. You have the other movies. So I don't really get that. Then you're looking for where are we? You're looking for a filmmaker who has a strong point of view, who can find themselves in the characters and in the story. That's what drives the momentum of the storytelling. And I think JJ is a perfect example of that. He can't do anything without his energy, enthusiasm becoming very much part of the storytelling. So he's very fun to be in a room with when you're trying to break a story, because he does have that amazing energy, enthusiasm, and he's funny. That always helps. We spend a lot of time laughing. How did you get to the point where you felt we got this with the story of episode 9? Well, I wouldn't say you ever get to a point where you just go, that's it. It's a constantly evolving process. And I think this is the thing as well, isn't it, with Doomcock coming out with his 500 cuts and things like that. We know that movies have multiple cuts. It's something that Zack Snyder recently spoke about with the Snyder Cut as well. So you don't just, write it down and it's done and it's one cut and that's it. So people like Doomcock don't understand the industry, or they're pretending they don't just to stir the pot. I mean, there's still little things that we're trying to get exactly right. Right now, you never stop the story iterations, right? This is how films are made. And people who try and stir the pot don't get that, or they're ignoring that aspect, that procedure of making a film that go on in making these movies. But we know what these previous 8 movies are. We know what the story is. So in this movie, we're taking all of what's come before, and we're trying to find a satisfying conclusion. And I think we have. And that's something that we can only depend on our instincts to arrive at. Whether or not we have, and then we have what I would call the family and friends that you put in and you show things to. Yeah, this is how Disney do it. They don't bring in the public, as far as I know. They bring in their own people and their friends just to have a look at it. That's how they do their test screenings. Whether that works or not, I'm not too sure. When you try to get some kind of feedback and make sure that you're making sense, that you're delivering on things that you intend, that's something that we're still talking about right now. Rian Johnson made some controversial changes in episode 8, The Last Jedi, especially considering its dramatic purpose as the second movie in the trilogy. Were you to an extent deliberately setting out to challenge fans and their expectations? We definitely did. We're talking all the time about how we move Star Wars forward and how we keep it relevant. And I think that's the big challenge for Star Wars. It's really difficult with Star Wars to find the next step, the next evolution. I think that's the problem with the whole concept. Obviously, we don't want to just keep making the same movie and over again. So I agree with you. I mean, I love what Rian did. It's an absolutely wonderful movie. I think he's an extraordinary filmmaker, and I really appreciated the bold moves that he did make. I think people forget that, especially when you're doing a trilogy structure. The first movie is setting things up. The second is usually the conflict, and the third is the resolution. The problem is, Kathleen, there wasn't enough conflict left in the end of the movie to keep people interested. Now, that's going to be the big question. Are people interested enough in Star Wars after The Last Jedi? So you're bound to have that second movie, much the way Empire Strikes Back was probably the darkest, the most dramatic of the three. Yes, but that's the problem with The Last Jedi. It's the stark opposite of that. Was probably the darkest and most dramatic of the three. We talked about it with Indiana Jones. You know, we did Raiders of the Lost Ark, then we did Temple of Doom, which was dark and created a lot of controversy. People were surprised at where it went with the storytelling, but frankly, that's the whole point. I love that we have these amazingly passionate fans who care so much. And I know sometimes they may think we don't listen. You see, this is very, very compelling. She's finally come out to face her detractors and the fans. She knew she had to come forward. I knew she had to come out. This article, this interview is very compelling and very interesting. Finally, she talked. So sometimes they may think we don't listen, but we do. And I thought it was fantastic that people got that engaged. This just showed me that everybody else, how much they care. And that's important for all of us that are doing this. We really look at them as the custodians of this story as much as we are. We look at it as kind of a partnership. Now, this is interesting. She's saying that we, the fans, and then the people making it, have a partnership. That's very interesting words. She's talking very, very well. Now, you're going to notice a lot of Fandom Menace videos trying to cut this to pieces because they're clever and they'll find a way. But from what I'm seeing thus far, she's speaking very well, very intelligently, and most of all, she's saying mostly the right things. This is important. It's a shame she waited up until now. I think that the negativity after The Last Jedi was so much they just wanted to take a step back. And then obviously with Solo, they realised they had to redevelop their plans and think again. So, right, before I carry on, The Last Jedi, I said it before, very boring, mediocre movie for me. Or when I say mediocre, it didn't get my juices flowing like The Force Awakens. He certainly directed a film that looked like Star Wars, but I felt it wasn't the actual film, I think. It was the ending of the film that really underwhelmed me. I wasn't excited for the next step because it didn't leave me with that dark element for the concluding episode. That's my real criticism of The Last Jedi. I think that Rian Johnson is a great director and a great storyteller. I just feel that maybe Star Wars wasn't his. He wasn't really suited for Star Wars, but some people like this film, and that's okay. Right, anyway, certainly whatever movie comes after this, if it's unconnected to the Skywalker saga, that's one of the biggest challenges in the history of the franchise, they ask. Until now, pretty much everything has been in some ways connected to the original story. What are your thoughts on that? This is interesting. Remember, I haven't read this. It's an incredible challenge, and it is something that we're in the middle of, and I can't even begin to tell you where this may end up, because I think you are absolutely right. I think whatever this next movie is, and how it begins to define a new way forward, it's something we want to take plenty of time and plenty of conversation and careful thought before deciding exactly what we're going to do. Exactly, Kathleen. Very, very important that you take your time. You think about this. Star Wars matters to us. And you know what? I think Star Wars does matter to Kathleen Kennedy. She's been in this industry for nearly 40-odd years. She's worked with George Lucas and Spielberg. She does care. She absolutely has made mistakes, and she's pretty much admitting that here. That's what I like about this interview. She's saying, you know what? Here's the white flag. Come in the middle of this treaty. We've made mistakes. Of course, she's going to say she loved what Ryan did. She brought in Ryan Johnson, and she probably did like what he did. I don't think the film's a total disaster. I just think the film's slightly underwhelming, and it just didn't leave Star Wars in a very exciting place. As I say, my criticism of it. So the guy asked another question. So you truly haven't yet decided what's next? Interesting. No, we've got various things we're looking at, and various ways in which we can begin or not. As you can imagine, do you go back? Do you go forward? Exactly. All those questions are being asked. Do we stay in this galaxy? Do we go to another? Another would really work for me. The universe is never ending. Laughs. The good news and the bad news, they have endless possibilities. It's liberating, it's exciting, and it creates a lot of pressure and anxiety as well. Do you know what? I'm really liking what she's saying. And here's the thing as well, right? Whether we like what Kathleen's done in her leadership of Disney Star Wars and the sequel trilogy, she is a human being. And we must be careful how we speak about people. Again, Fandom Menace, which was something a movement I supported for a long time, are not respectful of people. And I think that's a shame, because we must remember firstly, these are human beings. And if you don't like what they do, be constructive or get out the game. That's my opinion. How did Marvel's Kevin Feige come into the mix? Right, this is interesting. Kevin has been a huge fan of Star Wars, and he's made that pretty clear. And I think when he went off to do a couple of the Spider-Man movies, he realised that he could kind of step in and out of what he's doing specifically with just Marvel. He talked to us, and he talked to the studio and said, is there any chance I could step in and do one of the Star Wars movies? And I thought it was a pretty cool idea. So we're just beginning to talk about what that might be and when that might be. But it's way off, yeah, definitely way off, because I think they'll probably want to do a trilogy first and maybe inject an individual movie in the middle of those trilogies. I think they may want to bring the Star Wars stories back, but might want to do more interesting things. So Feige has made a success. We all criticise Feige, but he's got the name. He's got the confidence of the mainstream audience. He's obviously said, I want to do one, like a little kid who loves Star Wars. Give him a chance, I say. Have you thought about how much longer you'd like to keep doing what you're doing? Again, this is interesting. I've really enjoyed this, I have to say. It's been incredibly exciting. And just the fact that George asked me to do this, I felt a tremendous responsibility with stepping in and taking care of the franchise. And if there were going to be new movies to really pull a team around this that cared as much as he did, what happens in the future and how long and how much longer I do this, I don't know yet. I'm looking at all of that. It's been incredibly satisfying to reach this point where we've completed a saga and I think made a really wonderful movie. It's going to feel very satisfying to the audience. So that's what I'm focused on right at the moment. And what the future holds, who knows? Now, this is interesting. She doesn't kind of say, listen here, I'm going to be here for the foreseeable future. I would say after this, I don't think it's going to be yet. I think after The Rise of Skywalker creeps away from the cinema and digital, everyone can download the digital copy and get the Blu-rays and 4Ks, then I think they'll announce the new structure. She'll probably retire or she'll probably get another position. I think the future is, and we've heard, I mentioned this on my Big Mouth podcast yesterday, that reports are saying that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni will take over the development process of Star Wars. Now, she says an interesting thing here about Kevin Feige, that he found while doing Spider-Man, he could creep in and out of those movies and do something else. So I think he will have some kind of role. I think it's definitely going to be Feige, and I'm not, it's not rocket science to say. I think she will step down and take another position or retire. I think Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, and Kevin Feige will definitely all be running this in the future. And look, whatever I think of Feige watering down, like the Professor Hulk thing, which I'm angry about, he's a very clever man. He's created the most successful franchise ever. These three guys running Star Wars fills me with a lot of confidence. I genuinely believe Star Wars is heading to a better place. And I genuinely believe if you are being manipulated by the fandom menace, stop and think about this. You love Star Wars, right? You want to see good Star Wars. She has come out and said, we do listen, we do care. She's pretty much saying she's going to step down after all of this. Give the three guys that are coming in a chance. Start loving Star Wars again. The fandom menace just want to make money out of you. That's all they care about. They're not genuine people. They're not genuine fans. They may come across, they're good actors. And I believe that after the rise of Skywalker, it's going to be very, very difficult for the fandom menace to keep on spreading their poison. And I hope that's the case, because I was manipulated by them. And I'm lucky that I fell out with Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers. I thank you, Jeremy, because you really woke me up from my slumber. And now I'm being positive about Star Wars, and I'm happy about that. I've looked back at the mistakes, but now I don't want to keep on going on about it. I want to look forward to an exciting Star Wars future. Thanks to Bob Iger's new book, we know in some detail about George Lucas' dissatisfaction with The Force Awakens. What are your feelings about that? This is interesting. Personally, I've had a relationship with George going back to all of us meeting before making Raiders of the Lost Ark. So this is a long 35 plus years that I've known George, and I continue to be very good friends with George. And I think there's plenty of examples where people create something that is fundamental to who they are, where it's difficult to letting go and watching that becoming something different. So I think initially that was difficult for George. I don't think he anticipated how hard that would be. And JJ came into it with such enthusiasm and frankly reverence for Star Wars and for George, and had to find what was personal for him. He had to make it his own. Every director who comes into a movie has to make something their own. They have to find themselves in the storytelling, and then that's going to become a different point of view. And I think that's all George was reacting to. Again, she does very well there, I think, to calm things down. He may not agree with every choice JJ made. He may not agree with every choice Ryan made, but he appreciates the filmmaking that I know. And he also appreciates, for instance, what ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, Lucasfilm's visual effects arm, has done in the work of these movies. I mean, that's a company he created. And he just continually tells me how astounded he is by how far things have come, and how now whatever comes into your mind can be achieved. And he came down, for instance, on The Mandalorian to see what we were doing. He's worked a long time with director Dave Filoni. Now, Dave Filoni is interesting because if he is one of these guys who's going to, be in charge of development of future Star Wars content, he is the Padawan. He's George's Padawan. He trained him. He showed him how he likes to do things. So I think Dave Filoni's involvement has always been very important. And that's one thing I do agree with the fandom menace. He should have been, in a proper position in new Disney Star Wars from the beginning. And he's known series creator Jon Favreau, and he was just like a little kid on that set when he was watching what we were doing. So I see him get caught up in this again, and I think there's a little bit of regret that he's not on the stage and directing movies. So let me say that again, and directing movies and in it still. And that may filter into it as well. I can't really speak on behalf of what George is feeling all the time, but I know that he's very, very proud of what he created. And to see people go on and enjoy this now into almost 2020 is pretty remarkable. So that's interesting. So obviously she's not denying that he probably isn't happy with some of the stuff JJ did and Rian Johnson did, but they do seem to be friends still, although she would say that, obviously. But again, she spoke really well, and I think that will help calm down the discourse. As I say, the fandom menace will manipulate this. Have your own mind. Think for yourself. Is there any universe in which George can be lured back for some kind of one-off or just do anything? Now, this is interesting. I doubt it. But listen, I think that would be fantastic. If he would be interested in doing that again, but I doubt it. He's loving doing his museum in Los Angeles, the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art right now. That's a huge project, which is going to be absolutely fantastic. It's a narrative museum, so it really keeps him engaged in storytelling. I think he's loving that, and he's loving his little girl, 6-year-old daughter, Everest. So he's pretty fulfilled. Jesus Christ, he's got a 6-year-old daughter. Bloody hell, George, you still got it, mate, ain't ya? Congratulations. Wow, I must say this because we've spoken a lot about Kathleen Kennedy. We've said a lot of things, but she spoke really, really well. Of course she prepped for that interview. And of course they've got Rolling Stone in because they trust Rolling Stone. But I think Rolling Stone asked some challenging questions. It's obvious to me that Bob Iger And Kathleen Kennedy sat down and said, right, we're gonna, you're gonna retire after this saga trilogy. We're gonna say you were behind that, good or bad or indifferent. You can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs, right? So I'm definitely convinced that she's going to step down after the rise of Skywalker. I think a lot of people will be happy about that. Mistakes have been made, as we all know, but it's time to move on. I think it's a fabulous interview. I think she gives some very intelligent, good answers. They asked her about maybe George Lucas coming back to do maybe a film or something. She said she doubts it, so I would have to believe her there. I think for him to do maybe an episode of The Mandalorian, direct it, or maybe write and direct his own Star Wars film, but he's pretty old now, but look at Clint Eastwood. So I don't think it's off the table, but she probably feels that it wouldn't happen. But anything can happen now, and it could be something Kevin Feige, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are working on. So again, very interesting. She talks about The Last Jedi. She says she likes the film. She talks about how Rian Johnson tried to do something different and put himself, people have got to put themselves in it. As I say, Rian Johnson wouldn't have been the one I chose, and I feel it was a very underwhelming film that took people's anticipation away for future Star Wars. But I think with The Mandalorian and with the excitement that they're going to kind of do a lot of special things with the rise of Skywalker, I think most people are excited. The internet isn't the place that represents what people are really thinking. You'll be surprised how many people don't talk about what they're really thinking on the internet. Now, we come onto YouTube, we do these videos, but we are not talking for everyone. We are putting ourselves out there, right, to hang out to dry sometimes. We're giving our opinions, but even if I had 10,000 subscribers, I wouldn't be representing your views. You'd be watching, and I'm representing my own views. And how you feel about all of this is down to you. I'm going to give you my opinion that I believe Kathleen has spoken very well. I think it's very well done to her and Bob Iger to construct this interview to make sure it happened before the film came out. It was very well. Now, obviously, some things she tries to justify her actions, but she also admits that she's made mistakes. Well done there as well. And I think we're coming to a place that after the rise of Skywalker, I will reiterate, I believe Kathleen Kennedy will retire. And at the end of the day, she's been in this industry for a long time, and people have said a lot of things about her. She obviously, the T-shirt saying the Force is female was stupid. She could have put a T-shirt saying the Force is male and female. That would have been cool, right? People would have still reacted badly to it. But, if you can't, it does seem like she was trying to exclude men. So these weren't good messages. She has made mistakes. She has been very naive. But at the end of the day, she's, when you make mistakes in life, it's important you come out and you face your accusers. And that's what she's done. She can't stand in the middle of the street and face a bunch of angry Star Wars fans. It'd probably be quite dangerous knowing us Star Wars fans. But she has done this brilliant interview. It works. And I really, really do believe it will help the future of Star Wars. I believe she will step down. I believe Filoni, Jon Favreau and Kevin Feige spoke very well about Kevin Feige. He's a bit way off his movie, but something will be done. They're obviously talking about the future now. What's going to happen? Again, Filoni, Feige and Favreau will be going forward with that. So this is how I feel right now. It doesn't matter what I've said in the past. This is how I feel now. And the present is very important, right? It's important to look back and see what you've said and see how you feel. But this is what's great about experience. With experience, you can kind of think, that stuff I said about Kathleen Kennedy and Rian Johnson, maybe I was a bit harsh. I'm excited for the future of Star Wars. And I hope that you are too. I want you to comment down below and tell me what you think of this interview. What do you think of my opinion? Do you think I'm becoming a shill, a soy boy, as Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers would say? Or do you think I'm taking the higher ground? It's up to you what you think about what I'm saying. But I'm asking you this question. As a Star Wars fan, what would you rather do? Give the future of Disney Star Wars a chance so you can enjoy it like you used to, or keep on being angry all the time saying, Kathleen Kennedy, Bob Iger. Wouldn't you rather be happy and excited about Star Wars? Give it a chance. Trust me, and believe you me, go and watch The Rise of Skywalker and make your own mind up about it. And believe you me, you will see that Star Wars has a great future in front of it.